Hey guys, Ollie here, back with another review for Rare Month, our month-long celebration of all things Rareware. We're looking at many developers' games all through the month leading up to the release of Rare Replay on August 4th, so be sure to subscribe and check back for all our reviews. Now, as you might imagine, I can't really do a Rare Month without this game inevitably coming up at some point, so without further ado, here it is. This is GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64. Released in 1997, yes, 2 years after the film of the same name, GoldenEye initially had some pretty slow sales. Yet as word of mouth spread and more folks started to discover just what a console first-person shooter could be, the game became a resounding success for both Nintendo and Rareware. Today the game is fondly remembered as one of those watershed moments in the industry. GoldenEye was a rare and gigantic leap forward in games that only comes along every so often. However, just under 2 decades since its original release, with no HD version in sight, does this legendary console FPS still have some legs? Or should you enlist some new blood for covert ops? Let's find out. GoldenEye, as you might imagine, follows the plot of Pierce Brosnan's first Bond outing, recreating many scenes from the 1995 flick, albeit with some decidedly lower production values. So, sorry, no voice acting here, folks. Just some occasional lines of text. Truth be told, aside from reading mission briefings on Bond's watch, it's hard to imagine anyone who hasn't seen the film actually understanding what's going on here. Which, I suppose isn't really the point. But still, those expecting something incredibly deep and nuanced should be warned, as GoldenEye will simply not satisfy that particular itch. Dig a bit further, however, and you may just scratch the one you've really been looking for. From a gameplay perspective, GoldenEye is a relic of a bygone era. The old "they don't make them like they used to" adage holds very true here. Gone are the recharging shields, 2-weapon limits, and, depending on your company, racial slurring 13-year-olds of the modern era. In their place is a game where Bond has seemingly boundless pocket space for all manner of firearms and ammunition, where auto-aim is more than just a passive feature, but due to the N64 controller is a necessary component of the core design. By all accounts, this game is archaic. Then why is it still so fun? I'll give you a hint and say it's not the single player, which, while enjoyable if you like speed-running objectives, isn't going to be most people's cup of tea. So then, it was as true in 97 as it is now that GoldenEye's appeal lies squarely in the multiplayer. Despite what is still terribly poor split-screen performance, even by pre-millennium standards, sorry fanboys, it's still just as fun as ever to play grenade launchers on Temple or just shoot it up on Complex. There's a certain something to the mechanics of this pre-dual analog world that makes running and gunning with a few of your best mates an absolute joy, even if Objob is still really cheap. Put simply, you just don't get this type of gameplay anywhere else anymore, aside from perhaps the original Perfect Dark. The maps are simple, but the modes and options are plenty. There's a very good reason that so many people still play Inverted, and it's this game, and it's fantastic, bombastic, split-screen action. This is perhaps the one part of the game that really transcends its time, and makes what would otherwise be a relic an absolute joy to play. Let's just get this out of the way quick and say that GoldenEye is not Rare's best looking game, not by a long shot. The flat faces and muddy textures of this early polygonal world look totally dated, even when up against Rare's other N64 titles. Looking at something like Perfect Dark, it was always evident that Rare could in fact make a better looking first-person shooter. The performance isn't terribly great either, dipping below 30 frames per second pretty consistently, especially in the multiplayer. At least the music is still nice. As one of composer Grant Kirkhope's earlier works, GoldenEye's score complements the action very nicely and is a good showcase for the man who would soon compose so many of the soundtracks to some of my favorite games of all time. Overall, GoldenEye's presentation is simply decent, serviceable, alright. Nothing more at this point, which is sad, but it's a simple fact that what was once cutting edge is now simply dated. Taking everything into account, GoldenEye has aged fairly poorly in many respects. The performance isn't great, and the story, while present, is, well, present. The title simply doesn't have the same lasting charm that something like Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong Country does. Yet despite these seemingly glaring flaws, the game prevails because its multiplayer is still simply unlike that of any other title. Even 18 years after its release, you can still bring this game out to a party and have a great time. And I don't think that's ever going to change. And for that, this dated but legendary first-person shooter gets a 4 out of 5.